Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this project, Characteristics of Life. A couple of people have had some questions, so I wanted to create a little short video, which is really a lot of what the format of this year is going to be, to help you work through these projects. Okay, so there's a lot of these in bio. As we go throughout the year, they'll become more and more frequent. So let's talk first about this project, Characteristics of Life. Okay, if you go back to your lesson that is entitled The Study of Life, Unit 1, The Study of Life, we talk a little bit about here, or the Odyssey Ware Act program actually talks a lot here about how to define life. And when you're formulating this definition of life, it really should fit all situations. Okay, so some of the things that they talk about are movement, sensitivity, and complexity. And I really want to stress to you that I don't necessarily like the way that this frames the characteristics of living things. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're gonna break away from that. And while I don't think that it's a bad thing to read this, you should certainly check out the characteristics of life videos here. But I'm going to pop up here a quick little PowerPoint that talks about the characteristics of life, and then we'll talk real quickly about how to break this project down. So, when you're talking about living things, really, there are seven components that make living things alive, if you will. Okay. In order to have or in order to be considered alive, you must meet these criteria. Okay. All living things must be made up of cells, whether they're single cells or whether they're multicellular organisms. Okay. All living things must be able to reproduce. They must either be able to reproduce sexually or asexually. Okay. Either through budding, binary fission, or some form of asexual reproduction. There has to be a universal genetic code. What does that mean? That simply means that in order to be considered alive, your cells have to contain DNA, okay, and RNA, and they must be able to express proteins. So that universal genetic code, your DNA, is what is your blueprint that makes you an individual. Okay, there must be growth and development throughout your life cycle. So what does that mean? Okay, well, growth is pretty obvious, but development. Think about you as a human being from birth until death. You go through a myriad of changes in your life that really define your life cycle. You get taller, you gain weight, your voice changes as you hit puberty, your hair grows, your hair gets gray, your voice changes, your ability to physically do things that you wouldn't be able to do at birth, but you could do maybe as a 25-year-old. For example, lifting weights, playing sports, walking, running. All of those things are developmentally part of your life cycle. Okay? Same thing if you're looking at other organisms. Okay? If you look at a plant, for example, a plant grows and it develops throughout its life cycle. If we're talking about trees, they start as a seedling and they grow to very tall, broad structures. Okay? Obtaining and using materials and energy. Okay? Simply, we refer to that as metabolism. Okay? You have a specific metabolism, and every organism has their own specific metabolism. Okay? Maintaining internal balance. That's also referred to as homeostasis. So you have an internal core temperature. Every organism has a specific core temperature. You have a specific blood pressure. You have a specific heart rate, a specific respiration rate. Okay, all of these things keep your body in stasis or homeostasis, in balance, to ensure that you can carry out the life processes that you need to. And then finally, the last criteria would be, as a group, being able to evolve as a species over time. So those are really the seven characteristics of living things that you should be focused on when you're doing this project. So I don't want to detract from what this talks about, but I want you to also have the information that you need in order to be most successful on the project. So it talks about really 10 characteristics here. We can combine some of those into really seven major characteristics. So as you go through this project, I'm not necessarily looking for big paragraph answers. You can be short, you can do bullet points, you can do little brief sentences for this project. So the characteristics that an object possesses. This just goes back to what we discussed. What are the characteristics that you must possess in order to be considered living? Okay? And then from there, in the second question, it talks about think about water and how it rolls up on the beach. And I want you to think about all of the qualities of water. And it asks, is it alive according to the characteristics of life, and why or why not? Again, in order for an organism to be considered alive, it must possess all of the characteristics that we talked about. It can't just possess one or two or three and then none of the others. It must possess all of them. So when you're framing your response to this question, think about that. The third question talks about thinking about a petal being plucked from a flower. Is the petal alive according to the characteristics of life? Again, go back and think about the criteria for being a living thing. All of the characteristics at all points throughout development need to be thought about when you're talking about a petal being plucked from a flower. Okay, think about this way. If an organism has an amputation done to their body, is that part of the body living any longer? Think of it that way. And then finally, think about a bush in your backyard. Is it alive according to the characteristics of life? Again, the whole theme of this project is to get you thinking about what those 7 characteristics are and how can you frame them when you look at living organisms. So as you go through and you frame these answers, and again, I'm very flexible in how you want to do that. You can do it in a Word document, you can write it right in there. It's entirely up to you. You can do it as bullet points. You can do it as short little sentences. I'm very flexible with regards to that. Keep the characteristics of living things in mind. Certainly go back and review the videos in the section that's entitled Unit 1, Biology, the Study of Life, What is Life? And also, there is a whole bunch of PowerPoints that are on my Moodle site that also talk about the characteristics of living things that you can use to help you complete this project. I hope you guys, if you encounter any problems, certainly reach out to me in the virtual office, email or phone, and I look forward to working with you going forward.